Hello, everyone. Welcome to Virtual Coaches Training presented by Nike. We will be getting started in just a minute or two. So go ahead and get yourself situated. If you do have a question today for any of our panelists, please put them in the Q&A at any time, and we'll try to get to them throughout today's training. But we'll be starting in just 1 or 2 minutes. We appreciate you being here. So just hang tight and we'll get going shortly. Let's see here. There we go. Yeah, thank you though for those of you joining. We're going to let everyone kind of slowly get in here before we get started in just a minute or two. So again, if you have any questions for our panelists today, including Chase Utley, please put them in the Q&A at any time throughout today's training. And as always, we will be live tweeting today's virtual coaches training. So please be sure you're following along on Twitter as well. We are at Dodgers FDN on Twitter, and always use the hashtag Dodgers RBI. And we will respond or retweet any of the comments that you make about today's virtual coaches training. So we appreciate you being here, and we'll get started shortly.
Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our virtual coaches training series. My name is Nichol Whiteman, and I am the CEO of the Los Angeles Dodgers Foundation. With Dodgers RBI, we have always placed health and wellness at the forefront of our work. With mounting uncertainty as we navigate a pandemic, young people have an incredible amount of information to process. At LADF, we like to say it's bigger than baseball. And while sports brought us here today, I refuse to ignore the trauma that our nation experiences as a result of inequality and injustice. Our children are suffering, and certainly coaches play a vital role in their healing. Yet again, another unarmed Black man was gunned down, shot 7 times in the back while his young children watched from the car. His name is Jacob Blake, a father, son, cousin, friend, a man deserving of a fulfilled life. Yet in this moment, he lays paralyzed, fighting for his life. And while the kids that we serve may not have known Jacob directly, they are forced to repeatedly digest the nightmare of Black Americans constantly fighting for their humanity. Today, we celebrate the legacy of Jackie Robinson and his exceptional sacrifices in breaking the color barrier in Major League Baseball on April 15, 1947. Jackie endured the agony of racist taunts on that fateful day when he walked onto Ebbets Field, and they continued for years to come. This moment in history is recognized as a joyous occasion, But let us realize that the trauma from our nation's sins continue to haunt Black Americans until this very day. So what do? We certainly don't quit. We organize and we partner with organizations and corporations who care. Partners like We Coach, who proudly focus on mental health as a part of their youth development efforts. Their BRAVE model involves acknowledging the stress that kids endure. They teach coping mechanisms to survive and thrive. Thank you so much, Megan, for being here with us today. Many of you know Megan is one of my faves. Instead of basking in the glow of childhood, our kids are listening to their parents tell them how to survive police interactions and make it home. Yet the fundamentals of coaching, yes, those comprise our efforts at the surface, but at our core, we're here to protect the children in our communities and provide the opportunities that they deserve. We could not do this work without the phenomenal support of Nike. Nike has recently come on board. This is actually our 10th virtual coaches training series, but Nike is starting today as a corporate sponsor of this series, and we're so happy to have them. Their resources are important, but we are even more invigorated to see them use their platform, a platform where they too have been unapologetically stating that Black Lives Matter. Nike is part of the solution, and we are proud to have their support on this journey. Right now, the pain is deep. We've been through so much, but together we will make it. I'm excited about today's event. This is what invigorates me. This is what is re-energizing me. This is where we get to show our coaches that they too can be a voice. Please join me in welcoming one of our LADF Team All-Stars, Director of Youth Programs, Tiffany Rubin.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you. Thank you again for everyone for joining us today on this training. I know we have a lot of returners, so welcome back. And for some new faces, thank you for stepping up and being part of these conversations with us. We appreciate all the support and all the efforts our coaches and our parents are doing out in the community. We stand with all of you in order to fight for change and support our communities. Before we get started, I just want to take some time to thank all our amazing Dodgers RBI supporters who we cannot do this without. I'd like to thank our community ambassador, Bank of America, our program sponsors, Helen and Will Webster Foundation, Kershaw's Challenge, the LA84 Foundation, LA County Department of Mental Health, LA Department of Water and Power, LA County Department of Public Works, the California Masonic Foundation, ARCO, Nike, and UCLA Health. We also have some fantastic program partners. So thank you all program partners for being part of this program and appreciate your support as well. We have a great session ahead. We are thrilled to have Dodger alumni Chase Utley join us for a great Q&A session. And as Nicole mentioned, we are grateful for Megan Bartlett from We Coach, who is with us today, and we'll be covering the promise of sport to promote racial justice. So very excited about those topics as well. Thank you again for joining all of us, and we'll go ahead and get started. I will throw it to our other all-star, Sean Mulligan, Manager of Youth Programs, to get started.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. Very excited about today's panel. It is going to be an amazing conversation with both Chase and with Megan. Before we get started, as always, we would love and appreciate if everyone took the time to follow along to our Dodgers Foundation social media accounts. They're all shown on the screen right there. Our Instagram handle is @Dodgers Foundation, our Twitter handle @DodgersFDN, and to find us on Facebook, you just can go to facebook.com/Los Angeles Dodgers Foundation. Always use the hashtag Dodgers RBI to be reposted. Like Tiffany said, great crew and panel with us today. We do have a beloved figure in Major League Baseball, not only with his time with the Dodgers, but also with his long career with the Phillies. He is a 2008 World Series champion, multiple-time All-Star and Silver Slugger Award winner. Chase Utley with us today. Incredibly excited to hear from Chase on his opinion on youth sports, getting kids more involved, and how he works with his own children who are involved in youth sports. And also Megan Bartlett, the founder of We Coach, who does great work with sports-based youth development, also with trauma-sensitive training for coaches, and also promoting girls' activity in sports as well. Like Tiffany said, she's going to be presenting about social justice and racial justice in sports. So really excited to have Megan with us today. But we are going to go and get things kicked off with Chase. First, just want to say, Chase, thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate it. How are you doing?
John, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the time. How are you doing, by the way?
Oh, not bad. Busy week, a lot happening, a lot of good and a lot of bad, but really great to have the conversations about everything. We've had a really great week this week with celebrating Jackie Robinson's legacy. I'm really excited to be talking about that today, but also covering the things that are challenging us in our daily lives. And glad to have Megan here to be able to talk about that. We had a great conversation with George Lombard, Dodgers assistant coach, on Tuesday. Had a great panel with some of our Dodger employees that attended HBCUs yesterday. So really great conversations all week long, and ready to finish off a great week of those with this training today.
Perfect.
But just to kind of jump in, just because we've been doing such a great job in remembering Jackie Robinson's legacy. I think tomorrow is the official new date for Jackie Robinson Day, but I really just was hoping to get your thoughts not only on Jackie's legacy, you also played at his alma mater, UCLA, but also what did his legacy mean to you as a Dodger? And could you speak more on what honoring Jackie Robinson was like when you were an MLB player?
Right. Well, I had early exposure to Jackie Robinson playing at UCLA. We played at Jackie Robinson Stadium. He has a huge statue in the stands, and it was something that we walked by every single day as a player. You park your car, you walk through the stadium, and you walk by Jackie's statue, and you can't help but notice it. And I think we all know how important he was to not only the game of baseball, but sports in general. What he endured over the courses of his career, the perseverance that he put forth. I mean, we all know how talented of a player he was, and without him, I probably wouldn't be as fortunate enough to play with some of my great teammates that I've had in the past, with Jimmy Rollins, with Ryan Howard when we were in Philadelphia. And I think we all thank Jackie for what he was able to do, and she's just a good human.
Right. And it's really, I think, great that, I know last year we celebrated the 100th anniversary of what would have been his 100th birthday last year, which was a great celebration. And just every year, it seems like they're doing more and more to kind of honor his legacy. So that's great to see. And I guess, did you have maybe any type of moment that you could remember offhand about a season or a time where there was a special event or moment dealing with Jackie Robinson that you remember celebrating or it meaning a lot to you?
Well, every year, it used to be early in the season when there was baseball in April, we would all wear the 42 on the back of our jerseys. No name, just the 42, both teams. And it was something that we cherished doing. It's always interesting to look out and you see a bunch of the same numbers, which is not normal, but we recognize the importance that he had on the game of baseball, and it was something that we looked forward to every single year.
And with the last, not only the last 24 hours, but just over the last few months with all the different events that have been transpiring, dealing with racial inequality, I was just hoping that maybe you'd like to comment just on your thoughts, maybe on how players have played a role in kind of trying to contribute to supporting that, and just your thoughts about the last 24 hours.
Yeah, I think as an athlete, whether you like it or not, you have a platform and you have a voice. And what the Dodgers did yesterday, as well as the Giants and a few other teams, by showing that they're not going to play, they're going to show their voice. They're going to continue to stand together. And I watched the press conference yesterday with Mookie and Doc and Kirsch and Kenley, and it was moving because you could see how serious everybody took it. I think the fact that Mookie is so respected in the Dodgers clubhouse says a lot, and they wanted to support his vision. And I think we all know it's time for a change. As a parent, as a father, as a mentor, I think it's important to continue to educate our kids on what is right and what is wrong. And if we can continue to do that, it's not going to change overnight, but if we can continue to do that over time, we will definitely see a change in this country.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it, Chase, for you to take the time to comment on that. I know it's been really wild last 24 hours, still, things happening right now, but definitely appreciate getting your feedback on that. And just a quick reminder to all the participants here today and all the attendees, feel free to continue to put some of your questions for Chase in the Q&A. We're going to definitely try to make time for Chase to have a few minutes to take some of your questions about his career, his thoughts on coaching in youth sports, or anything that he kind of comments on, or anything that you're curious about when it comes to Chase and his career. But Chase, really to kick things off, just would like to kind of, if you could give everyone kind of your experiences growing up playing baseball, how'd you get involved? Who are some influential people in your early life in the game?
Honestly, I grew up playing wiffle ball in the front yard of my neighbor's house. A good friend of mine, we would play wiffle ball in the front with his dad. We'd get all the kids in the neighborhood to play along, and that's kind of how it all started. I was pretty typical. I played t-ball and worked my way up the ladder as I got older, and I really loved baseball. I took a liking to it at a young age. Not sure where it was going to take me. I just knew that I loved playing catch. I loved hitting the baseball, and I wanted to continue to do that. I played a few other sports as well, but baseball was something that I really cherished. And I grew, I developed. I had lucky enough to have a number of coaches at a young age kind of point me in the right direction, give me the instruction, the proper instruction that I needed at that time. And as you grow, you get stronger, you develop a little bit differently, and everyone matures at a different age. At a certain point, I felt like, you know what, I think I have an opportunity to play baseball more than just through high school. I want to have an opportunity to go to college and play there. And I was lucky enough to go to UCLA and play 3 years there, made some tremendous friends. And I was drafted by the Phillies. Played a long time there, and then I was able to come back home to my home team that I grew up watching since I was 6 years old, and put a Dodger uniform on. So it was a good ending to a fun chapter in my life.
Wow, that's really great. And a big kudos for me for the wiffle ball shout out. That was like my #1 neighborhood game for sure in our neighborhood. All my old friends, we had a friend of ours whose dad was a baseball coach. So he'd have all the equipment, even at a wiffle ball pitching machine, which I didn't even know was a thing as a kid, which was a lot of fun. So I can definitely relate to having a lot of good times playing wiffle ball as a kid. But just to talk a little bit more about coaching, because we all know how important coaching is, not only because of skill development, but because of how it can provide youth and young people with leadership qualities and just learning how to be a good teammate. Did you have any individual coaches that kind of stood out to you throughout your upbringing as you got older, maybe into high school?
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I was extremely fortunate to have guys that were motivating, guys that knew the game of baseball, and guys that cared and wanted you to succeed, even at a young age. My t-ball coaches were great. I can still remember them. I still keep in contact with them today. But once I started to really develop and think I had an opportunity, my freshman coach in high school pushed me hard. I got the most out of my ability. I was kind of a late bloomer. I was the little kid. I remember looking at my driver's license when I first got it at 16 years old, and I was 5'3", 118 pounds, which it was not big at all, but I loved it. And my freshman coach pushed me. The following year, I was able to play varsity, and just the confidence that they gave me, as well as that motivated me to become better, is something that I look back on and was a huge part of my success at that level. I've kind of been at the right place at the right time. When I went to college, great hitting coach, great head coach, again, motivating me to always want to continue to get better. I had some skill, but I needed to refine it and also enhance it a bit over time to compete with the big boys. and then you go off to pro ball, and you meet so many different faces going through pro ball. And I took a lot from the coaches in high school and college, and I took that with me through pro ball, and finally was able to accomplish my ultimate dream and play in the big leagues. And when you get to the big leagues, you never know how it's going to go. But again, I was extremely fortunate. I played for Charlie Manuel. He was my manager in Philadelphia for a number of years, and he was somebody that made me feel that I was the best player on the planet. Even when I was in a slump, I was 0 for 15, 0 for 20. He would still come up to me, pat me on the butt, and tell me tomorrow's your day. And I respected him, and whether he was using psychology on me or not, it seemed to work over and over again. So I think confidence for me is a huge factor when it comes to coaching.
Wow, it sounds like definitely had a lot of great experiences with some good coaching throughout your entire life, which is great. Had to play a huge role in your development, and that kind of leads us into our next conversation. Just the youth sports in general, and how you kind of see it today. Maybe how you can compare it to your time as a kid, as a youth sports athlete when you were growing up, and you have some younger children that are also getting into youth sports. Can you kind of compare and contrast the differences between youth sports then and now?
Yeah, it's definitely changed over the years. I'm just now starting to dip into it with my oldest son. When I grew up, I played Little League, I played Pony League. They were pretty standard segments to go through. And now it's changed a little bit. Those are still opportunities, but there's a lot more travel baseball than there once was, which I think is great, because I think kids can continue to play year round and hone their skills. But I am a big believer in trying to play a number of different sports. I think it's good for the brain. I think it's good for the body as well. I think it just creates different ways to have body awareness, where if you're playing baseball 365 days a year, you can possibly become a robot, if you will. But if you can play some other sports and just create different angles and different movements, I think overall in the long run that can be beneficial. So I think it has changed quite a bit. Like I said, I'm starting to get into it a little bit, and I'm not sure how it's going to go, but I'm excited to watch it happen.
Yeah, definitely. I know that we've learned just how much playing multiple sports can benefit a kid's development. So really, we encourage kids to kind of try out a lot of different sports, and hopefully you'll probably take that same route with your own children. Is there any kind of sports that stand out to them that you've kind of seen that they have an interest in so far?
Both my boys like baseball. So far, I'm lucky in that aspect, because I can actually give them a little advice. Now, whether they listen or not, that's a whole nother conversation. But starting to get into basketball, they play a little soccer. They love the pool. They love to swim. They like to be active, like most young boys do. So they don't, as a parent, being a professional baseball player now, looking down on them, the last thing I want them to have is pressure and feel like they need to play baseball. So I'm encouraging them to do whatever they want. I'm going to support that decision. If that's baseball, great. You'll have a good coach by your side. But if it's not baseball, that's fine too. I just want them to love whatever they get into.
Yeah, that's really great parenting tips right there for sure, that I think a lot of people are going to take it and definitely use with their own children. And just talking about kind of making sure that kids have confidence, feel good about themselves when they're playing sports. I feel like that was probably something that helped you a lot growing up. When it comes to youth athletes and young players, what kind of things do you think they benefit from the most? What do you think maybe a lot of coaches miss out on when they're coaching younger kids?
Well, I think it depends on the age level, but the younger they are, the more you have to be extremely positive with them, in my opinion. I think it's all new. They're trying to figure it out on their own. They're trying to work their body. Their hand-eye coordination is getting better as they get older. And they're also maybe trying to impress the coach or impress their parents or impress the other kids. So I think, positive reinforcement can go a long ways. I think, being negative at a young age has the possibility of being detrimental. So I'm as positive as I can with my boys. As kids get older, I think they can decipher situations a little bit differently, so that there are times where you can be a little harder on them and they'll understand it. But the younger they are, in my opinion, the more positive reinforcement is necessary.
And then would you have any advice for maybe some parents that are, getting their kids involved in sports for the first time, things to maybe avoid that you think, keep parents from going over the top, maybe getting too involved as their kids are getting into sports, and maybe back off a little bit? What do you kind of recommend for parents?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm still trying to navigate that myself. But so far, I think, obviously they're playing a sport, it's a game, but I think playing games within that game are important to keep them engaged and intrigued and wanting to continue to try to be better at it. So instead of just hitting them, 50 ground balls in a row and critiquing them on whatever they're doing right or wrong, I think, playing games, maybe 5 balls, you hit to one side, and then you have maybe, listen, if you can do that right, then you can hit me 5 balls. So make it some type of game to where there's some interaction there, to where now maybe you can participate somehow doing similar things. I think kids like watching their parents attempt to do what they're doing.
Yeah, definitely. And as players get older, I know sometimes it's tougher for parents who aren't, avid, either played baseball or softball in their lives growing up. They can only coach them up so much until they maybe get to a level that's too advanced for them. Do you recommend what kind of helped you? Did a routine help you as you got older? What was your kind of day-to-day like when you really were focusing on developing as a player as you got maybe into high school and college?
Yeah, I think, later in high school is when I started to develop and take it pretty serious. But I had that inner motivation in myself. There was no one, telling me what I needed to do. Obviously, I had great coaches around me, patting me on the back, pointing me in the right direction. But I wanted to be better on my own. So I would take extra ground balls. I would make the coach stay a little later than he probably wanted to throw me batting practice or to hit me ground balls. I would lift weights on my own as I got older, things that I felt like would help me become a better player, and they did. So I took that on my own. I think parents I think support is important, but I also think the child or the kid has to have it in them also. I think you can push a kid only so far, but they have to be able to kind of keep it going. So I think making it a positive experience will kind of keep them going in the right direction.
Yeah, and one thing that I always kind of love talking about is just team camaraderie, and just how that makes players better overall, like believing in each other and the coach believing in you. When you're on a team that has that kind of positivity or that kind of camaraderie, do you know, maybe early in the year when a team's really got it together and you feel like it could be a special season? And did you maybe feel that the year that you were able to win your World Series championship? And just, if you could talk a little bit about just that feeling of teamwork and how it really helps move teams to that next level.
Yeah, without a doubt. I definitely noticed that. I was fortunate enough to be on a number of great teams over the years, both in Philadelphia and in LA. And you sense it. You just see how guys interact. I think trust is a big factor. Trusting your teammates that you guys are all on the same page. You guys are, pulling on the same side of the rope. I think obviously you have to have a little talent on your side to be successful, but the year we won the World Series in Philadelphia in 2008, that was a talented team, but it wasn't the most talented team that I have played on before. So it just goes to show that guys cared about each other, guys respected each other, and I don't think it's necessary to be best friends with everybody, but as long as you have a respect factor and you can look somebody in the eye and tell them how you feel and no one's gonna get upset about it, I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I just love hearing, a lot of times teams have talented players, and, and seems to be a good group of talent on a team, but then they're missing maybe that one kind of camaraderie that comes together for really special teams, and that kind of takes them to the next level, helps them, get to that championship kind of level. And so that's great to hear. And really, I think team chemistry is just such an underrated quality in sports in general, not just baseball, but sports in general. So I love hearing stories about, teams that just gel and just are successful together. And then lastly, last question for you here. We couldn't, talk about your career, without mentioning your transition to the Dodgers. Could you talk a little bit about what it's like to move from a successful team you had a long career with to a different team as your career was, later on in its years?
Yeah, like I said before, I lucked out. I loved my time in Philadelphia, and I cherish it. I will never forget it. But it was a time when the organization was kind of going in a different direction. We had been so successful over the years, and it was time to not necessarily start over, but to rebuild a little bit. And me being the veteran, older guy, I still wanted to continue to win. So I think we were both on the same page that it was best to go in different directions. And I had a few different opportunities to go to different organizations. I held out hope that the Dodgers at some point would call, and lucky enough they did. Like I said, because I grew up a Dodgers fan. I was at Game 2 of the 1988 World Series. Oral pitched. I think he pitched a shutout. He had a couple hits somehow, some way. He had a few hits. But that was a special experience, and I've always loved playing at Dodger Stadium. And so that when they called, it was a no-brainer, but still difficult because I spent 12 and a half years in one city, a city that took me in, treated me fantastic. Like I said, it's something I'll never forget. But to have the opportunity to put on a Dodger uniform and play in Dodger Stadium on a nightly basis, it worked out pretty well.
That's great. I think the Dodgers were definitely lucky to have you. Fans loved you. You're kind of loved throughout your entire career as just a player with, a lot of great fun stories about you as well that are out there that I think people love to tell. And so really appreciate the conversation that you had with us today. We had some really good questions come in from the audience that
Great.
I'd love to get to. First, though, just to kind of kick things off, because a couple people asked this, just do you have any tips on what parents could maybe do with their kids right now while they're dealing with quarantine, being kind of stuck at home? Have you been able to work with your kids at all?
Man, I was going to ask you the same question. Listen, I try to get my boys out and be active outside. And whether that's playing catch, whether that's throwing some baseballs to them, whether that's playing tag in the backyard, anything to get them out in the sun, get them moving around, because I'm not sure about other parents, but it's hard to kind of get them off the couch at times, especially during this quarantine. There's just there's no places to really go. So you're stuck at home. So being outside, being active, playing games with each other, whether it's throwing the football around, throwing the wiffle ball around. The other day we had a wiffle ball fight in our backyard, and my two boys ganged up on me and wore me out pretty well. But they loved it, and I loved it too, because they were just being active. So I encourage just to get outside and be as active as possible. I know it's not easy. Trust me, I get it. But the effort can go a long ways.
Hey, well, you can tell them, Chase, we got our Dodger drills every Monday and wellness Wednesday every Wednesday. Tell them to look it up, and we got them covered.
I will.
Another great question that came in about youth sports. Let me find it here. Oh, I lost it. Oh, here we go. What words would you use and how we can motivate children, especially in difficult moments, since children tend to lose their spirits while they're playing? And so do you have any kind of tips on how to build kids back up, maybe when they're, slumping a little bit as a young athlete?
I think telling them that it's okay. It's okay to not be successful, because realistically, it's impossible from a baseball standpoint to be 100% successful. It's the same thing I would tell an adult. It's okay to make an out. It's okay to make an error. It happens, and let's get them next time, and try to keep their mind not focused on the negative and kind of switch it to a positive. So tell them that everything's going to be all right. we're going to get him next time. And making sure that you praise effort. I think effort is important, especially at a young age. Praising the ability that they're showing effort, whether they're doing well or not. That's besides the point. I think the effort is important to acknowledge.
Yeah, absolutely, 100% agree with you on that one. And then as far as not only, a lot of people had some questions about your playing days, not only, your moments that you enjoyed, but just how you dealt with adversity throughout your career. And then one question that came in that I thought was pretty interesting was pressure that players have to perform. So for example, someone was asking, you had a really long hitting streak. They said they had the year and everything, 2006, 35-game hitting streak. How do you deal with pressure when you're in those types of situations?
That's another good question. And you don't really know how to deal with it until you're in that situation. I was a pretty superstitious player. I would eat similar food on a daily basis. I would wear I would use the same bat until that bat didn't work for me anymore. And during that particular hitting streak that he's talking about, it starts off not really a hitting streak. You get hit after hit after hit. And then once there's, starts to be 20 games, then the media is paying attention a little bit more. So therefore you have to answer questions about it on a daily basis. And I felt like if I talked about it, I would jinx it. So I would deflect every single question that was thrown at me about the hitting streak. The beat writers, the media did not love my answers whatsoever. But after a while, I think they were amused by my ability to kind of, brush it off and change the topic or change the conversation. But the more pressure you put on yourself, the harder it's going to become. I think I recognize that baseball is difficult. I prepare. I have a routine on a daily basis that I go through, and when that game starts, I am ready. I'm as prepared as possible. And after that, whatever happens, and I can live with that. Yeah,
that's great. And we had a lot of good questions coming in that deal with. I'm kind of going to combine two questions in one here. It's kind of about leadership or mentorship, I guess you could say. A question was asked from Nicholas. When you were a young player, when you were a rookie, did you have any veterans kind of take you under their wing and help support you as you were a young player in the league? And if you could maybe comment on that, as well as things that some of your managers did throughout your career that enhance like the team chemistry and trust between players.
Yeah, to answer the first part of that question, I did. When I first got to Philadelphia, a player by the name of Pat Burrell, who actually went off and played for the Giants for a number of years, took me under his wing, forced me under his wing essentially, and made me, he'd either pick me up or I'd pick him up, go to the ballpark early. He was an early guy. He would get a workout in, and he essentially made me do the same thing. It was not part of my routine at the time, but looking back on that experience, it was the best thing that could have happened for me. Him kind of showing me the ropes, showing me what it took to be successful. And it's something that I implemented all the way till the end of my career. So I've talked to Pat. He's a good friend of mine. I've talked to him a lot. I've thanked him about it. He doesn't realize how much of an impact he had on my career because of what he did when I was a rookie. And I already forgot the second part. What was the second part?
Just a little bit about the things that your managers did throughout your career that kind of enhanced that team chemistry you kind of talked about before.
Yeah, Charlie Manuel, like I said, early in my career, he encouraged us as a team to hang out together, not just at the ballpark, but to go to breakfast together, to go to dinner together after a game, just to spend time amongst each other away from the stadium. And that, looking back on it, it created a camaraderie that I'll never forget. It's just, it's one thing to be at the field and hanging out, but it's another thing being in a completely different environment and seeing how guys interact with one another. And that was, in my opinion, a huge reason for our success over the years.
Wow, yeah, that's a great story. It's really great to hear ways that managers, and coaches help their athletes kind of come together and be supportive of each other. Really appreciate all of the things that you mentioned we're able to talk about today, Chase. Great information for our Dodgers RBI families and coaches. I couldn't leave though. There's one person that had not a question, but a comment. They wanted to say that their kids love you, Chase, especially because they found out you are a Los Cerritos Elementary alumni. Is this true?
This is true. True fact.
So they had to give you that shout out. I couldn't
Love that.
go unmentioned to you before I let you take off here. But Chase, again, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Amazing conversation. Please come back. You're invited back anytime. Absolutely appreciate it.
You got it, Sean. Thanks for having me, and good luck, everybody out there.
Thank you, Chase.
All right.
And now we are going to transition to our next great conversation. We have Megan Bartlett, who is the founder of We Coach, who does just a tremendous amount of work when it comes to sports-based youth development, trauma-sensitive coaching, getting girls interested in sports, and today's conversation, how sports can play a role in social justice. Thank you for your patience, Megan. We really appreciate you being here with us tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much. I did not have to be patient. It was great to listen to what Chase had to say and to hear some of the great questions from the group. So thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. I think in this moment, this topic is pretty relevant. So I'm going to share my screen because I have a few slides I want folks to be able to follow along with. Sean, are you able to see that?
You'll have to full screen it a little bit there. There you go. Looks good.
Good. All right. So like I said, thank you. Thrilled to be here. I know you all are doing a tremendous amount of supporting coaches throughout the last 6 months and everything that's been going on with both the sort of challenges of a global pandemic and the awakening or reawakening around the racial injustice in this country. And so on the day before the new Jackie Robinson Day, it feels like a great opportunity to talk about how sport can play a role in that. And also obviously in the moment with what started happening yesterday, as Nichol talked about, another Black man gunned down, and how a lot of athletes are choosing to use their platform to say enough is enough. And so I think in some ways, Jackie was the first person to say enough is enough. And that legacy continues on. And I think it's sort of important for us to do what we can to really understand how sport can play a role in that. So what I will say is that I am not an expert in racial justice. What I do know a lot about, what I've spent the last 15 years working on, is how sport is uniquely suited to help young people heal from the impact of trauma. And so the experience of 400 years of exploitation of the Black community is absolutely traumatic, and sport plays a huge role, I believe, in making in overcoming the impact of that. And trying to help us keep from doing that in the future. So what I'm going to talk about is why sort of healing is essential to justice, and how what we know about the brain can sort of make us smarter about how we go about looking at racial justice from a sports lens. So I hope that's good for everybody. So we'll start with a little bit about sort of my orientation here. Like I said, I have for the last 15 years focused on supporting coaches to have the tools that they need to support young people, no matter how they show up to the field, right? And what I came to find in the work that I was doing was that a lot of coaches felt like they needed more resources around supporting young people who have a lot going on in their lives, right? Who've been exposed to overwhelming stress or trauma in their lives. And the more research I did, the more talking to neuroscientists I did, the more talking to trauma experts I did, the more I started to uncover the fact that actually, even though we weren't really there weren't a lot of people thinking about it this way, that actually sport is uniquely suited to help us manage the impact of overwhelming stress on young people. And so to me, that means that sport is uniquely suited to help us meet this moment, because it can help us with stress and help us heal, help us cope with stress and help us heal. And without healing, I believe very strongly that there can be no justice, right? That part of the process of reconciliation is making sure that we are healing from the wounds of the past. And so without that, we can't get to a more just and equal society. So I worry sometimes that talking about trauma makes it feel super depressing. And when I tell people that I focus on the intersection of sport and trauma, a lot of people think, oh, that must be really discouraging. And in some ways that's true, right? Understanding the things that young people face on a daily basis, some of whom face a lot of really hard challenges, can be discouraging. And in this moment of what we've all been through over the last 6 months, there are definitely times when it's discouraging. But here's the thing. I think it's actually just the opposite. When you know about the brain, you know that people can get better. You know that we can heal. And so some of the sort of intractable challenges that actually seem less impossible when you think about what could happen if we focused on healing and rewiring our brains in a way that helped us cope with stress better. So I think it's actually really hopeful to talk about the brain and to talk about the impact of stress. And I get even more excited when I think about the tools that we have at our disposal. The fact that what we have with in sport are uniquely powerful tools in this piece. So like I said, we know young people are showing up to us with a lot going on. And in this moment, maybe even more so than before. So I think about it as sort of, what are they bringing, right? If they show up to the baseball field, what do they have with them? And these are little weights that sort of weigh down their equipment bags there. I'm quite the graphic artist, but I think about this as any kid, all kids. Before COVID, before the most recent challenges around injustice, kids would show up with a varying degree of things going on in their lives. And all kids, in some ways, have something that they're bringing with them. And then I think about this as sort of all kids now after COVID, right? We've all been through a collective traumatic experience. The uncertainty of a global pandemic is overwhelmingly stressful. And it's overwhelmingly stressful to some kids more than others for lots of different reasons, but we've all been through something that has changed our perspective on the world and changed the way that our bodies experience stress. And then this is sort of kids from historically exploited communities, right? So the Black community, Indigenous communities, Latinx communities, who are impacted by challenging circumstances and in their homes and in their communities, just like all kids, but also disproportionately affected by the impact of COVID. Right, both the actual illness and the implications of the sort of ripple effects of the pandemic, right? So all kids, kids after COVID, and then kids from historically exploited communities after COVID who disproportionately feel the stress of both the actual illness and the ripple effect of it. And then this over here is what it can be like for Black kids who are disproportionately affected by COVID, the actual illness and implications of the global pandemic, and 400 years of oppression, including brutal enslavement, Jim Crow, mass incarceration, state violence, and now watching Black people murdered, often with no repercussions, right? And so the chance that young people are showing up with more going on in their lives has increased dramatically over the last 6 months. We knew they may be showing up before that. They may have had challenges in their homes or their communities anyway, and now the chances that they're showing up with more stress just continues to rise. So why does that matter? Why is that important? Because trauma changes our brain, right? And to understand how it changes the brain, you have to have first a general sense of the way the brain is structured. So I'm going to do this in the sort of 1-minute version. The brain develops from the back to the front, both evolutionarily and biologically. So humans, the most advanced beings on the planet, have the most advanced fronts of the brain. And when you're growing up, when you're in your mother's womb all the way through your adult life, your brain starts developing from the back to the front. And the bottom of the brain, or the brain stem, is in charge of your basic functions, all the things that you don't have to think about. The middle of your brain is where you interact with the world, where you respond to your surroundings and you experience emotions. And the front, or the top of the brain, which is uniquely human, is your smart brain, the part of your brain that helps you deal with complex and rational thinking. Trauma impacts the back, lower part of the brain, sort of the middle back of the brain. And the amygdala is in charge of our stress response and how we, or sort of how we react to overwhelming stress. Its job is to keep us safe. It detects threat and helps protect us from that threat, which is great. We want to be protected. Right? It does what it's supposed to do. When we experience threat, the amygdala tells us we're in danger and tries to keep us safe. It does that by activating a set of responses. They start with F, fight, flight, or freeze. So for example, if you're being chased by a bear, we either fight the bear, we run from the bear, or we play dead. So that's great. That's what we want the brain to do. We want the amygdala to take over when we're under threat. The problem with trauma, or the experience of overwhelming stress, is that it short circuits the stress response, right? When we're either in danger so often, or the danger we're in is so extreme, it actually makes our amygdala, our stress response, overactive. It makes it hypersensitive. So now, because we've experienced so much stress, our stress response starts to try to protect us all the time, not just when we're being chased by the bear, right? So now our stress response reacts like we're being chased by a bear, even when the stress is only that we're not sure where we're going to be able to plug in our phone and it's on 2%. So stress changes the brain, and then it changes the way we react to stress. And if we are reacting to every stress in our lives as though we're being chased by a bear, that behavior won't fit the circumstance, right? That's the kind of behavior that causes coaches or parents or teachers to be frustrated because it seems disproportionate, right? You shouldn't react in such an extreme way when your phone is on 2%. You shouldn't feel like you're being chased by a bear. And that's how young people often get misunderstood around their behavior, right? Their stress response has changed their brain in a biological way. The chemicals in their brain have changed, and now they behave in a different way. And so what we have to do is make sure that we have a way to change it back, right? And sport gives us that tool. Sport is uniquely suited to do that through the power of relationships, because trust is the antidote to stress. Through the power of physical activity, because when we're active, the chemicals in our brain that are released from activity actually help calm and quiet the stress response. And through the building of resilience, right? The opposite of overwhelming stress is not no stress, it's dosed stress. We're actually looking to make sure that our brain gets practice at coping with stress. So if that's all true, right, and we know that stress impacts the brain and it needs to heal in order for us to sort of get back to a baseline, get back to a normal way of dealing with stress, then we can actually think about 3 things that have implications for this moment, for the sort of promise of sport to promote racial justice. The first that we have to know is that stress makes our brains dumb, right? So I just talked about how our stress response kicks in when we have overwhelming stress. And what it also does is, so it makes us more reactive, but it also shuts down the front part of our brain and keeps us from engaging in that sort of complex thinking, that rational, reasonable, complex thinking that goes on in the front of the brain. And so if we're thinking about wanting to explore some really hard, challenging conversations so that we can help young people understand what's going on in the world, so that we can convince people that we know who don't have a very good grasp of the history of racial injustice in this country. We have to think about how we're showing up, and how if we're overwhelmed by stress, then we are much less well prepared to deal with those conversations than we would be if we were sort of able to manage our stress, right? Because it makes us do dumb things. So when we're stressed, we don't show up in the best way that we can. We can't access the smart brain. We have to work on our own stress responses if we want to be able to learn more, become more anti-racist, dismantle white supremacy, not be defensive, attack oppressive systems. If we want to do any of those things, if we want to intervene when we see racism in action, we have to work on our own stress responses. We have to be regulated. We have to be able to cope with stress so that we can deal with the stress that comes with those conversations. Because a dysregulated adult can't regulate a dysregulated child. So a young person who's been exposed to this overwhelming stress from systemic oppression or from witnessing what's been going on over the last couple of months, it's understandable that their brains would become dysregulated. And as adults, in order to help them regulate, we have to be regulated too, because if we're not, we won't be able to help them. And sport is uniquely suited to help us regulate that physical activity, the safety of positive relationships, and the practice of experiencing stress and coming back to baseline. The second thing that's really important to understand in this moment is that the brain responds to novelty, right? If you think about it in this way, if you meet your coach for the first time, when you're a young person and you meet your coach for the first time, your brain responds in a way that says, what's going on? I have to make sure I'm safe. Is this person a threat? And over time, as the face goes from sort of novel to known, your brain stops sort of saying, oh, what's going on, right? And stops responding from that novelty. And instead, it actually has the experience of saying, oh, great, this is a person I trust. I can feel safe. So instead of having the stress response or the sort of chemicals that make us feel stress or feel threatened, I start to actually have the opposite. I start to have the chemicals that help us feel safe released, right? I start to have the feeling of, oh, this is a trusted person. I'm safe here. I feel better. And so the exposure to a diversity of faces actually helps us manage the biological reactions we have from the stress response, right? When the stress response is elicited by novelty, the more exposure we have to a diverse set of faces, the less likely we are to sort of respond in a threatened way to them. And this is really the promise of sport, right? That we build up positive interactions and associations with a variety of diverse faces so that they can become generalized. So if we have all these positive experiences through sport with faces that we wouldn't otherwise spend time with, then we can change the way we respond to novel things. They can go from being novel and threatening to known and protective, right? So we can turn this novel to known and avoid what happens when we feel threat. And so that is understanding that the brain is likely to respond to novelty is a big part of thinking about what do we want, how do we be intentional about creating experiences for young people where they interact with people that they wouldn't otherwise interact with. And then talked a little bit about this, but the idea that dosing builds resilience, right? Sport is uniquely resilience building, right? Dosing is the experience of being stressed and being able to come back to baseline. Resilience isn't something that's learned, even though in a lot of cases I think we talk about it like it is. It's experienced, right? You can't learn resilience, you have to experience it. It is by definition the experience of having a little bit of stress and being able to manage that stress and come back to a baseline. That's what being resilient is, the ability to process stress. And everyone needs to build resilience, right? It's something that helps us all deal with stress, whether we have overwhelming stress, like the stress experienced by generations of Black Americans, or if you're simply trying to master the stress needed to thrive in the bottom of the ninth, down by 3, bases loaded, full count, right? Resilience is important in both of those circumstances. And it's true that some of our young people need to build resilience more, not because there's something wrong with them, but because there are systems acting on them that are not acting on other young people, right? If you're a young Black person in this community, in this country, the chances that you need to sort of reset your stress response is just higher than it is if you're not, right? It's not true for every young person, but the chance that that there have been some kind of overwhelming stress acted on you by oppressive systems in this country is just higher if you're a Black American. So we also know that the impact of stress is inherited. The impact of institutional oppression is well documented. The impact of microaggressions is not micro. The impact of watching Black people murdered with few, if any, consequences lives in the body. And because of this, the experience of resilience building to stress is absolutely critical. We all need it. And young Black children need it more. Okay? So kids who've experienced overwhelming stress need to build resilience more. This is not an excuse not to attack the systems that cause the stress, right? Sometimes it feels like we're saying a community needs to build more resilience, and therefore that's a Band-Aid for the fact that they will just always experience more stress. When in fact, yes, they need more resilience because we're not doing a good job of attacking the systems that are acting on them. And instead, we need to offer them the opportunity to have controlled, moderate, and predictable stress so that they can build resilience, right? As opposed to the severe, prolonged, or chaotic stress that comes with institutional oppression. So if all of those things are true, right, if we want to make sure that we're doing right by the brain, if we want to make sure that we are using sport to help build resilience, we're using, that we understand the way that stress makes our brains dumb, and we want to use sport to make ourselves more able to handle stressful situations, if we want to understand all the mechanisms in play here, then we absolutely first have to think about how we're healing ourselves. A dysregulated adult can't regulate a dysregulated child. And so if we want to support the young people in our world or through this moment of reckoning around racial injustice, where we're watching such challenging and overwhelming situations happen, then we have to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves first so that we can do it. It's like having to put your oxygen mask on an airplane before you help someone else. Because if we're not regulated, if we're not able to manage the stress that's been going on through COVID-19 and this sort of dual pandemic of racial injustice, then we won't be prepared to do it for young people. And so hopefully understanding what's at play with making sure that we're working on healing will help us take care of ourselves first so that we can take care of young people. And understanding that the relationships, that the trusted relationships, the physical activity that helps us regulate, and the sort of pattern of being exposed to stress that isn't overwhelming, but is actually controlled and moderate and predictable that helps us build resilience will allow us to use those strategies for ourselves so that we can also use them for the young people that we're working with. Because, hopefully, if there is a silver lining to the fact that we are living in this moment, it's that we're paying attention in a new way, and that maybe this generation can finally be the one to deal with the 400 years of racial injustice that the country has suffered through. So, 9:03. I thought I was going to nail it right at 9 o'clock. I'm sorry. Once I get talking, I can't stop. So that's what I have for you. When I talk about the brain, I get so excited. So I'm sorry for folks that I kept 4 minutes late. But I'm happy to answer questions or let you go back to your lives.
Well, Megan, that was amazing conversation and information for our parents. I'm so happy that that kind of information is getting to more and more people now, especially the things about the brain. We try to train our Dodgers RBI coaches when we have our in-person coaches training on trauma sensitive training, just to have them kind of know all of those different factors that go into a child's behavior and their reactions and how they deal with certain situations. So really appreciate you sharing that information. We did have some good questions come in, but I know because of time, I was going to maybe direct them to potentially reach out to you maybe through social media or something like that, if that would work out. So anyone who did have a question, feel free. I shared the social media handles in the chat box, so feel free to take a look there. And then I'm just going to cover one or two things really quickly here before we let everyone take off. Just want to let everyone know we have, as always, another round of our Dodger drills and Wellness Wednesday this week. The Wellness Wednesday is, in my opinion, one of the best ones of the season so far. You can see myself and our youth programs team challenging the Dodgers RBI families and kids and players to beat us in our exercises. So if the kids out there think they can beat me working out, they've got to go watch the video and try to top what I did and what Tiffany did and what John did. So definitely check those out. And then also our social media handles, which we have shared, please follow and support us on there and interact with us on there. And then lastly, our Dodgers RBI coaches jackets, which are very popular. We have some good news. We thought we had reached our maximum number of jackets that we could give out, but we actually have some more remaining. So remember, the way to earn a coach's jacket is to participate in the coach's training and also complete the survey, which will pop up as soon as this webinar is over, and you'll also get it in a follow-up email tomorrow. So please be sure to do that. And remember, everyone that does the survey also has a chance to be raffled to win a Dodgers autograph photo. I was just able to send out our big group of winners from the first set of trainings that we had throughout the season. So hopefully everyone that won a photo received that. I know a few people have reached out to me saying they got their photo and they loved it. So definitely take the time to do the short survey following today's training. And our next training will be Thursday, September 10th, 5 o'clock. You will have the registration link for that in the follow-up email tomorrow. So just want to thank everyone for being here today and celebrating Jackie Robinson Week with us at the foundation with the Dodgers. And celebrate Jackie Robinson Day tomorrow if you can. And there's all sorts of ways you can do that with a lot of different resources and activities available for families and kids online. So just want to say thank you. Megan, thank you again for being with us. You're obviously, just like Chase, welcome back anytime. Hopefully we can do more in the future. So yeah, thank you again. And thank everyone for joining with us today. Have a great rest of the day, and we will see you next time.